Welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, December 12th, and we have a great show for you today. Our interview recorded just a little bit earlier was with Ellice Patterson. She is the executive director and founder of Ableist Dance. She's a wonderful person, an incredible artist, a heck of an advocate. She's one of my favorite people, and I'm so glad you'll have the opportunity to learn more about her and what she's up to right after the flip. But first, as always, we're going to start with the news. The United States Congress is once again looking to put together a stopgap spending deal that will keep the government from shutting down in roughly a week. Disaster aid is one of many issues standing in the way of a bipartisan deal. After the ousting of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad last week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that the United States will recognize and fully support a Syrian government that results from a transparent transitional process. The national inflation rate is 2.7% after increasing 0.3% over the past month. The annual rate is 0.1% higher than October. The Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities issued draft regulations for accessory dwelling units, commonly known as in-law apartments. A public comment period opens in late December. The Economic Development Bill that was signed last month by Governor Healy creates a streamlined process for licensure for internationally trained doctors. The new law looks to help alleviate the physician shortage. New emergency shelter regulations went into effect on Tuesday. The new regulations allow families who have lower support needs to go into the rapid shelter track and are permitted to stay in overflow shelters for up to 30 days. Higher risk families go into the bridge shelter track and will be permitted to stay for up to 6 months. Brookline's tree warden, Tom Brady, has left his position after 23 years with the town. The town's loss is Watertown's gain, as he will serve as their new Director of Public Works. Several state and local environmental and wildlife agencies are continuing their efforts to clean the oil spill that began Sunday in the Muddy River. The Department of Environmental Protection is still investigating the cause of the spill. Blue Bikes is offering 5 free rides during the Green Line shutdown. The Green Line is expected to be shut down from the Medford Tufts Station to Park Station from December 6th to December 20th. Folks, that's the news for the week. Please stay tuned and check out my pre-recorded interview with Ellice Patterson, the Executive Director and founder of Ableist Dance. Stay tuned. And welcome back to TV on TV here on Brookline Interactive Group. I'm your host, Tommy Vitolo, and today we have an incredible guest, a friend of mine for many years, but only once I got the job as state rep. We didn't know before that. I wish we had. Today's guest is Ellice Patterson. She is both the founder and the executive and artistic director of Ableist Dance. Ellice, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, look, we got lots of questions because you do something so interesting, to me at least. But before we start asking about all that, we ask, the same question we ask everybody. What have you been doing your whole life? What's going on?
Big questions, big life journey for sure. I am originally from Mississippi, small town Mississippi, and I originally moved up here for school. I went to Wellesley College, majored in biology, did a number of different research trips across the country and actually internationally. And it was in a period where I was becoming disabled and didn't think that dance was a space for me, especially since I'd been dancing off and on since I was 4. But as I was continuing to do, especially these international trips and that, finding space for myself to be more as like in the field as I wanted to. And I knew that I had to kind of shift paths. And so I actually ended up going to BU and got my master's there at Questrom and learned a good bit of different business skills and tips and tricks. And there it was when I was trying to re-engage in dance and felt as though dance wasn't a space for me, and that there were stories not being told that were in my community and not, and so had to create that for myself and for others. And since then, it has continued to go and grow ever since. And I have been fortunate to be able to lead such an amazing team over the years that has really contributed to prioritizing disability justice through movement and music and so many other artistic genres that are kind of connected through this work.
I think you alluded a little bit to ability stance, but what is ability stance? What does the organization do? How does it engage with participants, with the general public? Tell us about ability stance.
So Ability Stamps is a nonprofit that I founded in 2017, and its primary mission is to use dance and art overall as a tool to promote disability justice in Greater Boston and beyond. And through that, we have two programs. We have our professional company that is all adult artists with disabled and diverse identities. They're not just dancers, choreographers, but musicians, composers, access team, and more that really work together to put together dope productions that are telling different intersectional stories. And that can be from thinking of the intersections of climate justice and disability justice to the intersections of racial equity and disability justice, and really using that as kind of a platform to have representation on stage, not just through the artists themselves and how their different identities are, but also through the stories, the narration, the different elements that kind of weave together to tell powerful stories that are just not as often told in the broader dance field. And outside of that, we have our community engagement program, and that is all adaptive dance education classes that take place also across the greater Boston area and have in schools, elder centers, community spaces, etc. A large portion of those are also free and definitely free to the participants to make sure that we have high quality adaptive dance education possible and to really prioritize physical, social, emotional wellness as opposed to rigid curriculum that doesn't fit for everyone, but instead expanding the curriculum to fit for all. And outside of that, there are lectures on how this all works, access theory behind our shows, and how to make it actually useful in different community spaces that I lead.
So I want to hone in. You talked about performances. You talked about classes and sort of helping people dance, and you talk about lectures. And I want to hone in on the performances. And what we can see over your left shoulder is a woman. I think it's you. Maybe it's not. I can't tell. It's teeny tiny. But what we can see is someone who's clearly dancing and clearly has, a walker or some sort of medical device to help with movement. So our brains are thinking like, what is this show like? What is this show about? You mentioned people either like that photo or maybe have a limb difference. What other differences would we expect from the performers, and what is the show like?
Yeah, so that's definitely me over my shoulder dancing with a walker. I use a variety of mobility aids in the work that I do. Recently it's been crutches, but there has been a number of different mobilities that I've used throughout the years as my body has also continued to evolve, not just in this practice, but also as I age. And so thinking about how mobility aids, but also movement evolves with me, and how that continues to keep me on stage, and others as well. There are a number of identities in the company, either in a variety of disabled identities or just diverse identities, and as far as queer trans identities, different racial identities, etc. Because there's kind of this intersectional pull, if you will, when you realize that the work is not just for disabled audiences, but that the work is for all of us to really understand the spectrum of humanity, if you will, but told through a disabled lens.
You mentioned difference in abilities of audience members. Maybe people watching the program haven't thought that through. What does it mean to put on a performance for people who have different abilities in the crowd?
It's definitely always a great experience because of the wide range of identities that we have on stage, also naturally lends to the wide range of identities that we might have in the audience. And that can be accommodating different access needs, from having ASL and live captioning in the space to having audio descriptions, which are movements for blind and low vision audiences, to make sure that they are also aware of what's happening on stage. But within that, we have narration and storyline too, that is over the music as part of a universal design concept, so everyone can participate and understand what's happening at the same time. And also having things like trying to have scent-free spaces and trying to keep the sensory as sensory friendly as possible, though we have live music most of the time, so that can vary. And we're also still a mask mandated space, because for myself and a number of folks, we're still immunocompromised, and so wanting to make sure that we're all staying safe and continuing to do this work. And that has also lent itself to a number of masked folks with long COVID, et cetera, that come into our spaces and are appreciative of having that as an option when so many spaces aren't.
There's a lot to going to see a performance that is not identical to going to any other theater and just, sneaking in and you snuck in your little candy bar and you're there with your sweetie and you're watching the show. And for me as an audience member, that has both helped me think about other people who are out watching performances, just sort of, folks like me just going out to see a show, and also help me think more carefully about the performance itself. You've got a show that just closed. Tell us about the show that you just finished up a little bit.
We had a show that closed just this past weekend, Tales from the Crypts, which will be available online. And it was inspired by reading this book, Disfigured, by Amanda LeDuc, who goes into breaking down some of the stereotypes that are in fairy tales and how that's kind of been a fundamental framing for a lot of folks of how they view disability, because in a lot of these fairy tales, the villain is someone that has the disfigurement or the apparent disability or what have you. And so thinking through those thoughts and how ableism has really been a part of a lot of folks' foundational storytelling, what if we created or recreated stories that were centering disabled and diverse voices from that? And it was great because Amanda's Toronto-based, but we just connected online, and she flew down for the show and stayed at my house, and it was great. And was able to also give an opening to the show of the importance of representation, and especially representation in our fairy tales for younger folks, but for everyone. And from that, we were able to really talk about cool stories and reimagine them.
So I want to drill down a little more there. I can't tell if you're just so used to thinking about this sort of thing that you move through it quickly, or if as an artist you're not putting it all out there. You're trying to bring people in and maybe not fill in all the spaces. But I started thinking about this phenomenon, right? And the easiest way to think through it is like, the Disney animation films, right? Like that's, for many of us, that's the most clear example of sort of modern day telling of fairy tales, right? And what you said is right. I can think of several circumstances where, not only is the villain physically different, it portrayed as flawed physically, which I think one of your points is that's not really a fair portrayal, but also oftentimes the challenge of the central character is they're carrying a physical representation of a burden. And if they do everything right throughout the show and their journey, they're freed of that. They're healed. That is removed. And can you give us, I think that's right, but can you give us sort of an example of that, or even better, what's different about your performances and your stories in that regard?
I can give an example of a couple of stories that I recreated in this process and with the support of the dancers as well, because they also weave in elements of themselves into the movements, but also into the storyline. So that's also reflective of the folks on stage. But one example is we retold a Grimm's fairy tale, which is not as popular, probably because it's very dark. And the original title is Maiden with No Hands, and we remade it to Maiden with a Limb Difference. And in the original fairy tale, essentially the maiden was trying to go along with her father's wishes of basically cutting off her hands so she can be kind of given to the devil in exchange for wealth. And she eventually escaped that and went on a journey of self-discovery, and a king gave her a new silver hand and it was cherished and whatnot. And it kind of goes on from there, but that's summary of the tale. We remade it to be that kind of similar start of she lost a hand to the devil, essentially, who then just kind of backed off, and then she went no contact with her dad, and then went on this journey of self-discovery. She had a silver part to kind of show off the limb difference. But then as she's kind of going through this journey of learning about herself and learning about herself in the disability community and culture, kind of tossing off this shiny thing that's meant to hide her disability and really embrace her body and her difference as it is, and that her limb differences as natural as earth and not caused from evil or magic or anything, and to embrace the chosen family that she's found along the way. And so that was a story that was very difficult to move through in some parts, but also beautiful because I mentioned how, and for some, disability can be hard, but also it can be really, really fun, and just highlighting some of the joy that she experienced later on in her journey as well. And the dancer did have a limb difference as well. She's actually West Coast based, and we were great to be able to fly her in for this production.
Love it. Love it. I know it's we're approaching the holidays, maybe a quiet period, but you've got another production coming. Surely you know something about it. What's next?
Yeah. We have our next intersection show, which will be April 25th and 26th. And it is about highlighting BIPOC and disabled honorees, past and present, and really transforming their life stories into movement on stage. And with that, we also weave in bills that are on the state floor, collaborating with Disability Policy Consortium and our lovely supporters and friends like Representative Vitolo and others, to help uplift some of those bills that impact the deaf and disabled community. And it's year after year has been a beautiful journey of being able to connect with folks, especially our living honorees, and learn more about not just their work, but who they are as humans, who's supporting them in their communities, and more that you don't really get in a bio or a quick Google search, but really engaging and allowing them to be a part of the process as well. So we're representing them as accurately as possible. And it's always a great time to be able to connect life stories with also bills to really show for the audience the impact of how these bills could be influential in different life journeys past.
Where do you find your dancers, or do they find you? And how does this community sort of come together? I know you surely you practice somewhere, right? You must have a place. Give us some of the nuts and bolts about what happens in between um, the last night of the show that just closed and April 25th, the opening night of your next show, right? You're surely getting ready and writing and performing and choreographing. I'm not sure what that word is.
Yeah.
But where does all that take place? And how do you find the dancers?
Yeah. Dancers, it can be arranged. Originally, in the early days, I would just kind of go through social media and see who was putting things out there and connect with folks. That's how I connected with Louisa, who played Maiden in our most recent show, and several others. More recently, we put out calls at most once a year. And then I'll audition because the practice is rigorous. Is definitely not a recreational pursuit at all because of the level of not just rehearsing, but commitment that is involved to kind of bring these pieces to life. And also just being open when folks reach out and having their info on file. And there's a place, great. But we rehearse primarily virtually still. We did it before because before COVID, because of having different dancers in different states. But continue to do it not just because we still have dancers in different states, but also it's an access need of mine because I wouldn't be able to attend all of the rehearsals throughout the week in person and still do all that I need to do here on the administrative and also artistic side. So it's definitely an access need for me too.
And I will point out a place in society where we need to do better is we are not very good at helping people move around. That's true generally in transportation. But if you're relying on the ride, right, it's better than having nothing, but it's not quite like calling an Uber and it's just rolling up and you just hopping in and going where you want to go, right? And so the act of moving from one place to another, if you have a mobility challenge, it is harder. It does take more time. And then, you get to the place and it's up a flight of stairs and you're like, well, right. So all of that is also just another place where it's one more challenge. It's one more wrinkle. It's one more thing to overcome. And I get it, people in their own home, you sort of save, it's work from home for you, right? So that makes a ton of sense to me. The other thing I think I heard you say, I want to say it in a little bit differently is you don't have, for your performances, you don't have people who dance. You have dancers, right? This is who they are.
Absolutely.
This is not just something they do.
Absolutely. They are paid for this work. They are trained for this work. They are definitely dancers that are excited about this work, not just because of being paid, which is also important, but to be able to note that not only are access needs being met as best as possible and the ability to create stories that resonate with different identities or new, but also to know that others are respecting on the same level as other companies has been a big deal. And noting that you can say that you are both disabled and a professional dancer.
You must have a website. Tell us
Sure.
what it is.
It is abilitiesdanceboston.org, where you can also sign up for a newsletter and stay informed of upcoming events. And then also on social media on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok at Abilities Dance Boston as well.
How do you come to terms with selling tickets and needing, you got to pay your dancers, you got to pay the production site, you need to be paid. There's, work requires that. And also Um, if you're all about accessibility, surely you're about allowing everyone, regardless of their ability to pay, to come see the show. So how do you balance all of that?
So much fundraising is required to keep everything afloat to be able to pay folks as equitably as I can. Still not where I want to be, but a continual journey nonetheless. And it's important to both balance that and honor what they need, and also realize that our community has been historically unemployed or underemployed. And so financial resources are scarce, and I don't want finances to get in the way of impacting the ability to see the work. And so that's why we have unlimited free or sliding scale. Folks want to participate to some tickets in for both our in-person and virtual settings, because I also understand that, as you shared earlier, the ride can be hard, and not wanting to deal with the struggles of transit, or transit if you have a PCA or what have you, and just to be able to watch the show from the comfort of your home, or even being able to pause and take care of yourself and come back to it is incredibly important, so that we can continue to think of the different access needs beyond just kind of the set access needs that folks are used to, like ASL or an ADA compliant space.
So I want to end the show by sharing something that I've been thinking about as I've been listening to you talk, and thinking about it as a person who is not, doesn't think of myself, I don't think of myself as an artist. I appreciate art when I can. I'm not well versed. I'm not especially knowledgeable. I'm just a regular guy who, hey, that's interesting. That makes me think. Also, I've been injured before, but I don't have anyone in my life who's really struggling. Not even struggling, whose disability is apparent in that way, right? Who moves differently. There's no one close to me. I have some friends and colleagues, but no one's close to me who's lost their hearing or has lost their sight. And so because of that, not only do I not know anything about ballet, I also don't know anything about the daily things about being a member of a community who has disabilities. I know what a PCA is. A lot of people don't know what the personal care system. Right. Well, of course, some people need those, right? But so you're so far there that like, oh, this is very normal. And I'm sure that there are people on the stage and people in the crowd for whom, like, yeah, this is your daily life. Like you're experts in this. And what I want to tell people is, I'm not in any way, shape, or form. And I come to your shows, and it's a little scary for me, right? Because there's a lot of things that other people are comfortable with that I'm not as experienced with, but also it's accessible to me too, which sounds strange to say, but even though I don't know very much about ballet, and even though I don't know very much about the details of how one moves with another device, or I don't know much about any of that, and still I feel welcome and I feel comfortable, and I think, the performance makes me think, makes me really question some things that I just sort of assumed to be a particular way in my journey. And it turns out for other people in their journey, it doesn't work that way. So what I want to say to people who are watching is, if this totally made sense to you, go see a show. And if you're still not sure, if you're still like, I don't really see what the big deal is, or maybe that's not what I've ever done, go see a show anyway. Right? You owe it to yourself. This is not charity work. This is you as an audience member. Give yourself the opportunity to go see a show, because I've seen a couple, and every single time I know that I leave a different person than when I walk in. And that's not true for all artistic endeavors I go try to appreciate, but it is true whenever I go see an abilities dance performance. I don't go home and say, oh, I loved every minute of it. I don't go home and say, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But I do go home and say, there's a couple of things I was thinking about while I was watching it. Here's a thing that I never thought about before. This is really interesting, right? And so what I would say to people who are watching this is stop watching this and start watching some abilities dance. And you'll be better for watching it. So go to the website, check it out. April 25th and 26th is your next show. Ellice, thank you for doing everything that you do. Thank you for bringing me along for a little bit of your journey. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you again for having me. Really appreciate it. And again, if this is new for you, be open to it. Be open to learning about different styles of movement and artistry, and just being open to a completely different experience.
Folks, you've been watching TV on TV here on Brookline Interactive Group. We're so grateful for you watching, and I hope to see you next week. Be well.